It was a house. A beautiful house on a quiet, tree-lined street. The kind of street you see in movies about perfect American towns. This was Westfield, New Jersey. A place known for its good schools, its friendly neighbors, its sense of safety. And right there, at 657 Boulevard, sat a magnificent Dutch colonial. 6 bedrooms, a sprawling lawn. It was more than just a structure of wood and nails. It was a promise. A promise of a happy life, of children laughing in the yard, of summer barbecues and cozy winter nights. It was, for one family, the absolute embodiment of the American dream. But dreams, as we know, can sometimes turn into nightmares. And promises can be broken. This house, with its handsome facade and welcoming porch, held a secret. A dark secret that was waiting, patiently, for the right moment to reveal itself. Who could have known that behind the elegant windows a story of fear was about to unfold? A story that would grip a town and baffle investigators for years. What evil lurked in the shadows of this idyllic neighborhood? And why was it so interested in the new family moving in? The house looked perfect from the outside. But something was already wrong. Very wrong. The street itself, Boulevard, was one of the most desirable in Westfield. Grand homes stood proudly, each with its own history, its own story. Neighbors walked their dogs, children rode their bikes on the sidewalks. It was a portrait of suburban tranquility, a place where you locked your doors at night more out of habit than necessity. No one could have imagined the chilling events that were about to disturb this peaceful community. The residents of Boulevard believed they knew their neighbors. They believed they were safe. They were about to learn that a monster could be living right next door, hidden in plain sight. The house at 657 Boulevard had stood for over a century. It had watched generations come and go. It had seen children grow up and move away. It was a silent observer of life on the street. But now, someone else was watching the house, someone with a vested and sinister interest. This watcher claimed a connection to the home that went back decades. They saw the house not as a piece of property to be bought and sold, but as something that belonged to them, to their family. And they were not happy about the newcomers who were about to cross the threshold. An unwelcome was about to be sent. Derek and Maria Broaddus were ready for their dream. In June of 2014, they closed the deal. The house at 657 Boulevard was theirs. They had worked hard, saved their money, and now they had purchased a piece of paradise for their 3 young children. The price tag was steep, over $1.3 million, but it was worth it. This was their forever home, the place where their kids would make memories, where they would celebrate holidays, where they would grow old together. Their excitement was palpable. They couldn't wait to move in and start their new chapter. They were a normal, happy family on the verge of something wonderful. Before moving their family in, Derek and Maria started on some minor renovations. They wanted everything to be perfect. Derek, a senior vice president at an insurance company, would often go to the house after work. He'd paint a room, check on the contractors, and imagine his children running through the halls. One evening he was there, painting, filled with the pride of a new homeowner. The kids had already started to pick out their rooms. They talked about where the Christmas tree would go. The future seemed bright, stretching out before them like the perfectly manicured lawn of their new home. Nothing could possibly go wrong, or so they thought. The Broaddus children were young. They were the reason for this big move. A bigger house, a better yard, a safer neighborhood. Derek and Maria wanted to give them the best childhood possible. The house on Boulevard was the centerpiece of that plan. It had a big yard for them to play in, and the schools in Westfield were among the best in the state. They pictured their children making friends with the neighborhood kids, riding their bikes down the sidewalk, living a carefree life. They were good parents, trying to do the right thing for their family. They had no idea they were about to lead them into a terrifying ordeal. The purchase was a milestone, a symbol of their success and their commitment to their family. They told their friends and family the good news. They were moving to Westfield. They had found the perfect house. Everyone was happy for them. The house at 657 Boulevard was known in the community as one of the grandest homes on the block. The Broaddus family felt lucky, blessed even, to be its new owners. They were completely unaware that someone else felt they had a greater claim to the house. Someone who was watching their every move, even before they had spent a single night there. The dream was about to unravel. The day it all began was an ordinary one. It was a few days after the closing. Derek Broaddus went to check the mail at his new, still empty home. He sorted through the usual junk mail and bills. Then he saw it, a thick, white cardstock envelope. It was addressed in clunky, handwritten letters to the new owner. There was no return address. Just a simple, anonymous greeting. Curious, Derek opened it. The contents of that letter would change his life, and the lives of his family, forever. The dream was over. The nightmare had just begun. He could not have been prepared for what he was about to read. The letter inside was typed. It started off friendly enough, almost welcoming. "Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard," it began. "Allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood." But the tone quickly shifted. It became strange, then sinister. The writer claimed that their family had been watching the house for decades. "My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time." The word sent a chill down Derek's spine. This was not a welcome letter from a friendly neighbor. This was something else entirely, something deeply unsettling and threatening. The writer, who called themselves the Watcher, seemed to know things, disturbing things. They mentioned the Broaddus' contractors and the renovations they were doing. "I see already that you have flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be," the letter read. Then, it got personal. Frighteningly personal. The Watcher mentioned the Broaddus children. "Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Better for me. Was your old house too small for the growing family? Or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me." The letter ended with a series of terrifying questions. "Who am I?" it taunted. "I am the Watcher." The writer asked if they had found what was in the walls yet. "In time they will," it promised. Derek stood there in his beautiful new home, the letter trembling in his hands. The sense of joy and excitement he had felt just moments before was gone, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. The house no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a trap, and someone, somewhere, was watching them. The letter posed a final, chilling query. "Welcome, my friends, welcome. Let the party begin." A party of fear was about to consume them all. Panic set in immediately. Derek and Maria read the letter again and again, each time feeling a deeper wave of terror. The words seemed to leap off the page. "Young blood, draw them to me." This was not a prank. It felt real. It felt dangerous. Their dream home, the safe haven they had chosen for their children, now seemed like the most dangerous place on earth. How could they possibly move their kids into a house where an unknown person was threatening to harm them? The joy of their new purchase evaporated, replaced by a constant, gnawing fear. They felt exposed, vulnerable, and utterly terrified. The Watcher had invaded their lives without ever setting foot inside. Within days, a second letter arrived, and then a third. The Watcher was relentless. Each new message was more specific, more menacing than the last. The writer now referred to the Broaddus children by their nicknames. They even knew their birth order. "I am pleased to know your names now, and the name of the young blood you have brought to me," one letter stated. The Watcher described seeing the children. One letter mentioned their daughter painting on an easel on the enclosed porch. The details were too accurate to be a guess. The Watcher was close. Very close. They were actively observing the family's movements. The threats escalated. The Watcher seemed angry that the family had not yet moved in. "Where have you gone to?" a letter demanded. 657 Boulevard is missing you." The messages became more violent in their imagery. The Watcher wrote about what might be hiding in the walls and ceilings of the grand old house. "It is my pleasure to watch and wait for the day when the young blood will be mine again." The family was living in a state of constant anxiety. Every creak in the floorboards, every shadow in the yard fueled their terror. They were prisoners of a psychological war, waged by an invisible enemy who knew their deepest fears. The letters were a form of torture. The Watcher seemed to take a perverse pleasure in describing the family's future in the house, a future filled with dread. Will the young blood play in the basement, or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. The Broadus family was trapped. They owned a house they were now too terrified to live in. The Watcher had succeeded in turning their dream into a living hell, and the ordeal was far from over. The Broadus family was living a nightmare. They couldn't sleep, they couldn't eat. The joy and excitement that had defined the purchase of their new home were now distant memories, replaced by a constant, suffocating fear. Maria described having terrifying nightmares of a man's face staring at her, telling her he was watching. The stress was immense, a heavy weight that settled over their entire family. They were afraid to let their children play outside. They looked at their new neighbors not with a sense of community but with suspicion and dread. Who among them was the author of these terrifying letters? The Watcher had not only taken their house but also their peace of mind. Their dream home became a source of profound financial and emotional strain. The family had poured their life savings into 657 Boulevard, and they were still paying the mortgage and property taxes on a house they were too frightened to occupy. They were caught in an impossible situation. Moving in felt like putting their children in direct danger, but not moving in meant financial ruin. The psychological toll was devastating. Derek and Maria's relationship was strained under the pressure. The idyllic future they had envisioned was shattered, replaced by a grim reality of fear, anxiety, and mounting debt. Their beautiful house had become a beautiful prison. The children, though shielded from the specific contents of the letters, could feel their parents' terror. They knew something was deeply wrong with the new house. They would ask their parents, "Why are you so sad? When are we moving in?" How could Derek and Maria explain that a monster, a real-life boogeyman, was preventing them from starting their new life? The innocence of their childhood was being tainted by a shadow they couldn't see or understand. The family unit, once strong and happy, was beginning to fracture under the relentless psychological assault from the Watcher. The very foundation of their lives was crumbling. Every aspect of their life was now viewed through a lens of fear. A passing car, a person walking down the street, a strange noise at night, everything was a potential threat. They felt hunted. The Watcher had successfully isolated them, turning their own home into a symbol of their terror. The family tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but it was impossible. The anonymous threats had become the central, horrifying fact of their existence. The beautiful 6-bedroom house on Boulevard was no longer a home. It was a monument to their fear, a constant reminder of the unseen enemy who was watching their every move and delighting in their suffering. Desperate for answers, the Broadus family turned to the Westfield Police Department. They handed over the letters, hoping that law enforcement could quickly unmask the tormentor. The police launched an investigation, but it was a frustrating and difficult case from the start. The letters provided few tangible clues. There was no DNA on the envelopes or the paper that could be traced. The handwriting was nondescript. The Watcher was careful, a ghost who left no fingerprints. The police questioned neighbors, canvassed the area, and looked for anyone with a grudge or a history of strange behavior. But every lead seemed to go nowhere. The investigation soon zeroed in on the immediate vicinity of 657 Boulevard. The Watcher's letters contained details, like the children playing on the porch, that suggested the author had a clear line of sight to the house. This turned the entire neighborhood into a pool of potential suspects. Suspicion fell upon several individuals. One was a neighbor who lived directly behind the house. His family had lived there for decades, and some found his behavior eccentric. Another person of interest was a man who lived across the street. The Broadus family even hired their own private investigator, a former FBI agent, to dig deeper. The private investigator uncovered some strange facts about the neighborhood. One family, the Langfords, had lived next door for years. The matriarch, Peggy Langford, was in her 90s and her adult children in their 60s lived with her. They were described by some as odd and reclusive. Could they be the Watcher, resentful of the new young family moving in? They were questioned by police but denied any involvement. Another theory pointed to a man who had admitted to playing dark video games under the character name The Watcher. But he too was eventually cleared. The net was cast wide, but it came up empty every time. As news of the Watcher spread, the idyllic community of Westfield was gripped by fear and paranoia. Neighbors began to look at each other with suspicion. Who could be trusted? The person you waved to every morning could be the one writing threatening letters at night. Rumors swirled. Was it a former owner angry about the sale? Was it a disgruntled neighbor upset about the renovations? Or was it something more bizarre, a local myth come to life? The Watcher had not only terrorized the Broaddus family, but it also planted a seed of distrust that poisoned the entire neighborhood. Everyone was a suspect and no one was safe. The investigation became an obsession for Derek Broaddus. He was determined to unmask the person who was destroying his family's life. He installed webcams around the property and spent hours watching the feeds, hoping to catch a glimpse of someone leaving a letter or lurking nearby. He delved into the history of the house, looking for any past residents who might hold a grudge. He cross-referenced names and addresses, trying to connect the dots. The hunt for the Watcher consumed him, turning him from a hopeful new homeowner into a man haunted by an invisible enemy. His quest for justice became a desperate search for peace. Forensic analysis of the letters offered some tantalizing but ultimately frustrating clues. Linguists were brought in to analyze the writing style. They noted the archaic phrasing and sentence structure, suggesting the writer might be an older person. There was also a DNA sample recovered from the saliva used to seal one of the envelopes. Hopes were high that this would lead to a breakthrough. The police compared the sample to the DNA of several key suspects, including members of the Langford family. But there was no match. The one solid piece of physical evidence led to yet another dead end. The Watcher remained a ghost. Theories about the Watcher's identity and motive abounded. Was it a simple case of jealousy? Someone who had wanted to buy 657 Boulevard but lost out to the Broaddus family? Or was it something deeper, a twisted sense of ownership passed down through generations as the letters claimed? Some speculated it was a real estate deal gone wrong, an elaborate scheme to devalue the property. Others wondered if it was a prank that had spiraled out of control. The most chilling theory was that the Watcher was exactly who they claimed to be, a long-standing, obsessive guardian of the house, whose family had been watching for a century. Despite the efforts of local police, county prosecutors, and private investigators, every path grew cold. The Watcher was a phantom. They left no trail. They made no mistakes. They simply wrote their terrifying letters and then vanished back into the fabric of the quiet suburban town. The lack of resolution was perhaps the most terrifying part of the ordeal. The Broaddus family was left with no answers, no justice, and no closure. They were forced to accept the horrifying reality that the person who had tormented them was still out there, living freely, and perhaps still watching. After 6 agonizing months of living in fear, the Broaddus family made a painful decision. They could not move into 657 Boulevard. They could not place their children in a home that had been targeted by a predator. They put the house back on the market. But selling a house with such a dark and public story was nearly impossible. They were legally obligated to disclose the existence of the Watcher letters to any potential buyers. Who would want to purchase a home that came with its own personal stalker? The house, once their greatest asset, had become an anchor, dragging them down financially and emotionally. Their attempts to sell were fraught with difficulty. They listed the house for a price higher than they paid, hoping to recoup the costs of the renovations and their carrying expenses. But buyers were scared away. The story of the Watcher was now local legend, a chilling piece of Westfield folklore. The family even tried to sell the property to a developer who would tear it down and build 2 new homes, a plan that would have literally demolished the source of their nightmare. but the Westfield Planning Board rejected the proposal, leaving the family with no viable way out. They were stuck with their haunted house. The financial burden was crushing. They were paying a mortgage, taxes, and utilities on a multi-million-dollar home they couldn't use, all while paying for their other residents. The dream of a secure future had turned into a financial catastrophe. In a desperate move, they even tried to rent the property out. They found a family willing to take the risk. But just as they were about to move in, another letter from the Watcher arrived. It was addressed to the vile and spiteful Derek and his wench of a wife Maria. It was the most venomous letter yet, promising that the Watcher would not be deterred and would find ways to harm the new tenants. Finally, after 5 long years of torment and financial struggle, the Broaddus family managed to sell the house in 2019. They took a significant financial loss, selling the property for hundreds of thousands of dollars less than they had paid for it. The sale marked the end of a harrowing chapter in their lives, but it was a bittersweet conclusion. They had lost their dream, their money, and their sense of security. They had been driven from their home by an anonymous writer, a ghost who had won the battle for 657 Boulevard without ever showing their face. The nightmare was over, but the scars would remain. Today is July 9th, 2025. Over a decade has passed since the first letter arrived at 657 Boulevard. A new family now lives in the house, a family that bought it knowing its chilling history. So far there have been no new letters reported. The silence from the Watcher is as mysterious as the letters themselves. Did they stop because the Broaddus family was gone? Was their obsession tied only to them and their young blood? Or did they simply fade back into the shadows, their mission accomplished? The questions hang in the air, unanswered, swirling around the beautiful Dutch colonial like an autumn mist. The case remains open, but it is cold. Very cold. The Westfield police have never officially named a suspect, and no arrests have ever been made. The Watcher achieved a chillingly perfect crime, terrorizing a family and driving them from their home, all while remaining completely anonymous. They are a ghost in the machine of suburban life, a reminder that darkness can lurk behind the most pristine facades. The identity of the Watcher is Westfield's most enduring and terrifying mystery, a local ghost story that happens to be true. Was it a neighbor, a stranger, a phantom from the past? No one knows. For the Broaddus family, the ordeal is over, but the memory will never fade. They were victims of a unique and cruel form of psychological warfare. They lost their dream home, a significant amount of money, and something far more valuable, their sense of safety in the world. They will forever look over their shoulders, wondering who it was that watched them, who hated them so much, and why. The lack of resolution means there is no true closure, only the quiet, unsettling knowledge that their tormentor was never brought to justice. They simply had to move on, leaving the mystery behind them. And so, the house at 657 Boulevard stands, quiet and stately, on its tree-lined street. The children of the new family play in the yard where the Broaddus children were supposed to grow up. But the question remains, a chilling whisper on the wind. Is the Watcher gone for good? Or are they still there, in a nearby house, peering through their own windows, content for now? Perhaps they are just waiting, patiently, for the right moment to pick up a pen once more. After all, as they once wrote, their family has been watching for a very, very long time. And they could be watching still.